Welcome all. Undead here with another battle report. This time my Demons versus Dwarves. So I've been looking forward to this for a while. I'm really impressed with what I've read of the Dwarf book, and it's my first outing against them. It's always going to be a good thing to experience. So, diving right into it, you can see here the basic deployment. We have a number of hills, nothing fancy. We have in the middle, there's a sacrificial altar, which is following the rules for a charnel pit, a couple of forests, and we're playing diagonal deployment. So I'm going to dive into explaining the lists now, with various descriptions of some basic strategy on the deployment. So on my side over here, you see on the left flank, I have a siege chariot, a corn cannon, 4 blood crushers, the beasts of Nurgle next to them, and a large unit of demonettes. Normally I don't take blood crushers. I don't have a lot of faith in them. Pretty expensive for what they are, and they just don't hit quite as hard or live quite long enough to really justify their points. But I'm playing Kairos Fateweaver, so he can buff them quite substantially, and he really makes good use of regrowth spell from life with them. So I figure they've got some game in this list. Continuing further over to the right, we see the rest of it. We have the second Skull Cannon. We have a unit of 20 Plague Bearers. They've got the +1 leadership banner. It's not going to matter this game, but the Demonettes have the flaming banner. You won't see a banner there, the banner broke off, I hope you'll all forgive me. And a second siege chariot. I love that 4 chariot combo. It just gives you answers to pretty much anything in the game, not necessarily definite wins, but it gives you an answer, and that's pretty much all I can expect out of an army list, is that I have something to play with, and that gives me exactly that. So on his side, we can see a unit of Longbeards, it's a unit of Hammerers, it's a gyrocopter behind it. At the back you can see, I apologize for how blurry this image is, we can see a organ gun. At the back further off to the right, we can see a grudge thrower. It's been ruined up as expected. Then further over, we can see a flame cannon on the hill, and this is the one I'm really worried about. It's been upgraded to strength 6, and it's kind of terrifying. Then we can see a unit of iron breakers. And that's got his Dwarf Lord in it, and a runesmith. It's got 2 runesmiths, but the other one's not on the table yet. You'll see it shortly. It's got a little finger of dwarves. He's become very fond of this tactic of having a small throwaway unit that just gets in the way. Very similar concept to a rat dart. And then a second gyrocopter. Just a close-up, rather blurry close-up of them. You can see off the table I've got my vanguarding fleshhounds and Fateweaver himself, and the ever important glass of whiskey. Fateweaver is sitting with he's sitting with the light and dark head, and he got delayed in the scenario. So the dark head is sitting with the 2 long-range death sniping spells. He's sitting with the Pit of Shades, just to be highly aggravating, and then he's sitting with the fire cage, fulminating flame cage. So that's the dark head. To be honest, I never actually used that head in this game. This game ended up light head all the way, and so the light side head, as I like to think of it, was sitting with Fars protection from light, was sitting with speed of light, also from light, and was sitting with Barona's Time Warp, once again from light. And the final spell on the on that head was Regrowth from the Law of Life. And like I said before, I really think Regrowth has a lot of play with Blood Crushers, it has a lot of play with Beasts of Nurgle, so obviously I abused both in this list. And on his side, again blurry as hell, but that's also delayed, is a unit of Great Weapon Warriors. And the Great Weapon Warriors have another runesmith in it. So he's quite keen to take the 2 units of the 2 runesmiths for the 2 scrolls. which isn't really a bad move at all. So, if we go back to the original picture, I'm a little nervous. I don't want to get stuck in just, toe to toe with these dwarves, because I actually think they can outfight me. I don't have the static combat res that can soak up a lot of my damage. I don't want to just get stuck in. I want to isolate and grind down, which is my usual game plan. I want to keep the stuff I can't fight busy. I'm really worried that he might have a Rune of Might on his Lord's weapon. Turned out he didn't, but it wasn't a risk I really wanted to take. Turned out he actually had a great weapon, which is still frightening enough. So I don't want him kind of walking through my beasts, which are supposed to be my great tar pit. So I want to hold that up while grinding through his others. I want to try force him to combat and not just sit back and rely on his war machines by threatening him with things like Pit of Shades and the likes. And obviously take the combo charges as soon as I get the opportunity, because that's how I win the grinding war. Okay, and that's it. On to turn 1. So I have turn 1, and it's a fairly cautious turn 1. You can see here on the left I've moved my Tsiench chariot just behind the hill. I want a little bit of light cover protection against the organ gun if he decides to shoot it. The skull cannon's moved up with its blood crushers, as always ready to charge in and lend its aid to the fight. The blood crusher's also moving up. I'm trying not to get charged. I can live without the +1 strength the dwarves get on the charge. And I also want to pick my fights. I mean, I don't want them fighting against hammerets. 2 attacks each, they're going to hit just that little bit too hard. So, again, I need to be a bit more picky. You can see on the right here I've created a bit of a pincer formation, and as usual I like playing the Demonettes as a second wave. I can grind through a hell of a lot with these Beasts of Nurgle, and then eventually they die, and then the Demonettes step on up. Turns out I underestimate those Beasts of Nurgle, especially with Fate Weaver around. But we'll see that as it comes. And so here's Fate Weaver coming on from the back of the board, and he's being quite careful. He's staying just out of range of the organ gun. I figure let him work to take down Fate Weaver. He doesn't have a cannon, so I don't need to be as careful with getting right behind my Beasts of Nurgle or my Blood Crushers for protection. So he's ready to throw out a whole bunch of spells, and his spells aren't all that impressive, and it's worth noting here. So he started off, he tosses out a so he took the light side because I want to try blunt his first turn shooting. So he's taking the light side. He starts off by tossing out a what's it called? The Tsiench spell, the big one, Infernal Gateway. But actually I'm jumping the gun. Before that happens, and this is quite important, we have the Winds of Magic, and obviously with demons it's the Reign of Chaos, and we had the Dark Prince Thirsts, getting upset with Cornate models, and with getting upset with dwarves. And it actually did quite well. It killed off almost a rank of Longbeards, which is definitely something he was not enjoying. And it tried to hunt down one of my Corn Cannons, and I used Kairos' reroll to save the Corn Cannon. And it's worth noting here, we did a bit of a do-over, because for his second spell, Kairos tried to boost it Fars, and he miscast, and he actually killed himself. But my opponent, and myself I suppose, but it was all in my opponent's hands, he wanted to give his dwarves a decent test, and he knew a 550 point general killing himself in turn 1 doesn't really give him a good feel for what his dwarves are capable of. So we did a slight do-over there. Instead of giving him murdering him outright, he took 2d6 strength 5 hits, and he took 2 wounds out of that, and he got his resistible off. So for anyone who wants to really keep score, the dwarves actually won the game right there. But we played it on differently because we want to put them through their paces. So the net result of that is a boosted Fars. We then had shooting. We had the 2 cannons, which both missed spectacularly. So they were trying to take down the flame cannon, because that's the one that worries me the most, and they didn't touch it. So such is life. And then we head on to the Dwarfs' turn 1. So the Dwarves push on up. You can see the remnants of the Longbeard, so it's still a fair whack of them, sitting behind that charnel pit, altar in our case. You can see the Gyrocopter moving up to play interference games, and he's just pushing up the lines. He knows he outfights me in a straight fight, and obviously my job's to not give him a fair fight. In his shooting, everything ignores Fars, so all of his war machines have basically they need their +4 to, they need their 4+ to shoot, they all get them. The organ gun completely doesn't care about having a -1 to hit, and blasts one Blood Crusher off the table. And that's his shooting, which is quite unpleasant. We see, this picture on the right doesn't show it. It was after I clicked to remember to put them on. His Great Weapon Dwarves actually rock up on that side, and he's pushed up the Finger of Dwarves to protect his Iron Breakers from an unpleasant charge, or just from trying to be tied up by the Plague Bearers, which is something I want to do anyway. And he has marched his Gyrocopter over onto the flank of my Demonettes. So he obviously wants to burn out my Demonettes. I'm actually quite happy for them to burn me instead of play interference. If they play interference, I can't really play my game. If they're burning me, I can take casualties and still play my game. So I'm actually very happy to see that. Okay, so that's the end of turn 1. On to Demon turn 2. Right, so I'm going to go back to these pictures quickly, because the dice here actually show the charges, and this is where things matter quite a bit. So we can see now with the smaller frontage, I've got an opportunity to charge the Blood Crushers into the into the Longbeards on the left. Okay, but the first thing I do in order to make that work is, so I declare that charge, which I'm quite happy with. I really want to grind those down and make life a bit difficult for him. While at the same time my Beasts of Nurgle are charging that interference Gyrocopter. I think I can do some nice redirecting and isolate that unit of Longbeards if I charge and break that. So I'm quite happy with that. I can charge a bit over to the left where I can overrun. I don't necessarily want to hit the irons, the hammerers, although I probably should just to stop them getting strength 7. But the major thing is I just need to isolate them so I can do some grinding with the Blood Crushers. You can see on the other side, so the slightly longer view, that I declared charge with the Plague Bearers at the Finger of Dwarves. So that's all useful. The big thing to note is that he flees with the Gyrocopter, and on fleeing with the Gyrocopter I redirect, and I make the redirect to charge the Beasts of Nurgle into the hammerers. So now I can grind that down. So just to give them a bit of aid, I charge the Skull Cannon in with them. It ends up a little bit tight, but we managed to get everyone in, which I think is a fantastic grinding area to get into, because now I've completely isolated those Longbeards, and because they're already quite small, they've taken some damage, I can actually bring them down, I can pull them back down to earth, which really does matter. You can see I've pulled Kairos up just behind there to try benefit from a bit of cover, and I've pulled the Tsiench Chariot up just to help me out. So the Tsiench Chariot is now threatening all sorts of charges. Usually I just wanted to shoot, but it's actually quite a useful charging piece as well. So we can see a nice close-up here of the action, and we can see the results of the fight actually. So this is quite useful. So Kairos is now starting up the magic phase right up there, and okay, you can't really see all of the beasts because one has fallen over, but this is the start of the magic phase, and Kairos manages to raise back a dead Skull Crusher, which is very, very useful. And it's something he can get away with a lot because he's got a lot of light buffing spells that you just can't afford to let him get through. You can't let Baronas through on those blood crushers. They'll eat whatever's in front of them. You really can't let Speed of Light through, especially on the Nurgle troops. Fars also is devastating. So he really does have a lot to play with. I didn't even use the Tsiench debuff, which is probably something I should have used. So there's Kairos really making a nuisance of himself. And if we look on the other side, we see the most pathetic result of a charge. We see the poor old, what's it called? We see the Plague Bearers have charged that finger of Dwarves. They've done 0 casualties. They've taken 2 casualties from Hand Weapon Shield Dwarves. And the Dwarves have actually stuck around despite losing combat. So, not the finest day in the world for Plague Bearers. But so be it. They've just got to suck it up and deal. And we see from my shooting my chariots, yeah, this was an abysmal round as well. I managed to do 8 strength 8 hits on or strength 8 shots on the gyrocopter with the Tsiench chariot, and do 2 wounds. Can't roll for spits to actually hit. So, such is life. That's still alive, and he's going to get to play around with that quite nicely. The Blood Crushers actually exceed my expectation. They managed to break the Longbeards. I didn't expect the Longbeards to actually not be either stubborn or have a 1d6. And we found out later that my opponent blundered when he built his list. He actually intended to give them the 1d6, I think it's called the rune, the Ancestor rune. Lets you take a break test once on 1d6. He'd intended that and never quite got there. So the Blood Crushers actually were quite a bit more successful than I expected. But that's great. I thought they'd actually hold up, or I thought they'd grind them down. I didn't think they'd crack them on the charge. And yeah, this is a lovely grind we can see here with Kairos and friends. The downside is I've actually opened up a straight line for the organ gun to shoot Kairos, and that's not pretty. That's not pretty at all. So yeah, Kairos is going to take a little bit of pain. And we can see here I've been a right git. I've combat reformed at the end of that crappy combat with the Plague Bearers, just to hem in those Ironbreakers. I know my Plague Bearers are going to die. They're there to die. It's 20 troops, no heralds. They're just there to drag it out and die while I focus on the other things. Again, the same battle plan, same story. I need to isolate and grind. So they're there to do the isolating. They die while I kill things that are worth a lot more points than they are. And so that's Demon turn 2. And a very pretty turn it is. So now we dive into Dwarf turn 2. And I don't have pictures of before, just of the results of this turn. So his only charges, he charges the Ironbreakers into those Plague Bearers. He tries to get the Great Weapon Dwarves that were delayed in, but they failed their charge. They just stumble on forward. And so here we see the left hand side. So I've actually showed you here, this is jumped the gun slightly, this is showing you my charge. But his dwarves have rallied, and his flame cannon has done a staggering amount of damage. Okay, so I don't have the beginning of his turn here. We have actually, this is the beginning of my next turn, so we'll run through what we can see here from his turn. So in my last turn, what I forgot to mention is my second cannon had shot at his flame cannon, had managed to ding only 1 wound on it, but the cannonball went far enough to hit the grudge thrower and completely destroyed that, so that did pretty well. His flame cannon in this turn shot at the 3 blood crushers, and as you can see, killed 2 of them, leaving me with just 1 crusher, with the 6 not Ironbreakers, the 6 Longbeards rallying. So that flank isn't looking quite as pretty as I'd like it. His hammerers are now have actually had a good round of combat. They did a little bit of damage to me. I did nothing to them, and my skull cannon popped. So we can see the results of that. My poor skull cannon dead, and my beasts are in a poor state for grinding. They're not doing particularly well in that combat. And my plague bearers managed to hold up the Ironbreaker charge. They take quite a bit of casualties, but they hold it up, and they are doing fantastically well. So yeah, good on them, I suppose. Very impressive. And you can see from those poor demonettes, he's had a round of shooting with the steam cannon, the steam gun on his gyrocopters, and that's already knocked out a fair whack of the back rank of those poor demonettes. Okay, and now I'm going to head on back to pretty much the same pictures to really push to show you what I've done with this turn. So we'll just explain it anyway. So we head on up with the charge. So the Tsiench chariot is going to take it's going to play with its life, charging into a forest. I need to get rid of the organ gun, which of course lets Kairos get free to fly back behind his lines, where I can start casting my buff spells without too much worry of being shot to pieces. And Kairos is very, very fond of that. And the demonettes are just getting closer to the action, just in case they need it a bit later. I probably should have Swift Reformed to make them a bit thinner here, but they're still they're good for what they're good for, holding things up and just getting in the way at the moment. I want to grind out the left side, and we see the two chariots over here. Again, I want to deal with the war machine. So you've got the shot from the cannonball, and you have the Tsiench chariot, who once again fails to kill. He actually misfires and is lucky not to kill himself. He tries to kill that gyrocopter. So the gyrocopters are having a bit of free reign over here, which I can live without. And then we see the results. We see a grind, and I'm losing plague bearers at a fair rate, but it's not too surprising. But we see, and we see over here the Beasts of Nurgle again. They're grinding down, but not all that badly. And hey, we see that Blood Crusher. He's managed to charge, he's managed to send those off, and he's just reformed. He wants to come back into the fight. And we've seen success from the Burning Chariot. Important to note is magic here. In this turn I managed to get a boosted Speed of Light and a boosted Fars off. And I cannot tell you just how difficult it is for Dwarves to deal with both of those buffs. You've got Nurgle troops who have a -1 to hit, Fars is another -1, and their weapon skill 10. Even a Dwarf Lord needs 6s to hit. It is staggeringly powerful. And if I could do more damage to him with the Beast of Nurgle, I could actually do far better with that. But the target value is quite incredible. Okay, and then on to the Dwarf turn. So here we see the results of Dwarven industry. We have 2 gyrocopters that have managed to set up perfect steam gun shots on my demonettes, and we have a second unit of dwarves, this time great weapon warriors, into my poor plague bearers. Good news is the defense of my magical buffs is enough to hopefully survive a bit of this, but honestly those plague bearers are on borrowed time. And then he starts shooting. So you can see his hand on his flame cannon now. That hand is busy removing a flame cannon that misfired and killed itself. And that is the one penalty to the flame cannon, where it's possible that the rune of penetrating isn't the best option, although I'm undecided. But if it does misfire, it's got a 50% chance of killing itself. So that's quite a high risk war machine. I still think it's worth it because the damage it puts out is insane. But take this from whence it comes, as from a Skaven player, so work from there. I don't see a problem with high risk, high rewards. And he flames out a large portion of those demonettes. It shouldn't surprise anyone. The staggering thing is the plague bearers almost universally survive. They lose one plague bearer out of that entire lot. In fact, no, sorry, they don't lose any. So, not a great dwarf turn. They really can't get through all of those light buffs, which is making their lives incredibly difficult. So, a rather unimpressive air swinging turn, and the hammers are slowly being ground down. That BSB is saving them a lot of pain, because all the time I have to dedicate one entire beast to trying to get through a virtually unkillable dwarf BSB. He isn't actually unkillable, but his 3+ armor, 4+ ward was enough to hold off my beasts pretty much the whole game. I need something stronger to knock him down, or a couple lower dice. So anyway, that's the end of dwarf turn. I believe that's turn 3, if I've counted right at any rate. So, demon turn 4 and reprisals. So, the single blood crusher charges the flank of the hammerers. It's time to finish them. The burning chariot, now fresh from its victory of killing an organ gun, comes round to deal with a gyrocopter. We see the second second burning chariot desperately trying to finish its job and justify its existence after its far more successful friend. And we see a skull cannon dive through the forest at the next unit of dwarves. And I think it's worth pointing out here, with Kairos, with the rerolls, suddenly impact hits become easy to reroll. Dangerous terrains, when you're playing 4 chariots that are charging through forests, become much easier to stomach the risk. And it's a small side of Kairos that you don't really think of, but it's a really big advantage. Because I've lost games before to skull cannons charging through forests and just exploding. And it's a really huge risk that you don't kind of think of, because it's only 1 in 6, but you're risking a lot on that 1 in 6. So yeah, I'm quite fond of old Kairos in that regard. And here we see pure stupidity on the highest order. And remember earlier I was grassing a little bit about the Ancestral Grudge rune. Well, I think everyone across the internet and most of the Warhammer world has grasped about the idiocy of the Reign of Comedy table. Well, here's the Reign of Comedy table. You see that unit of 12 Plague Bearers sitting behind the Iron Breakers? Yeah, that's free. That's free because the Reign of Comedy is... That's right, don't care if it's not child friendly, it's fucking stupid. It has no place in the game. Anyway, okay, I'll try not to rant. Stupid shit. Anyway, free unit of Plague Bearers, obviously not a good day to be a dwarf at that point. So, we carry on to what happens here. And Kairos, because he's managed to now scare the dwarves with his light magic so much, gets through another healing spell. He gets through regrowth. And this is amazing to cast on Monstrous Cavalry, because not only are you healing back D3 plus 1 wounds, but if there are any leftover wounds, you use the Law of Life law attribute, and that ticks over another wound. So it's an incredibly valuable thing to get. So they managed to kill their way out of combat anyway, and there's one hammerer left alive and the BSB. So he's having a bit of a poor day. That gyrocopter survives the shooting. He's quite happy. The second gyrocopter finally gets shot out. And yeah, that charge proves to be highly successful. The charge keeps the Plague Bearers in line, and with just one buff on them, the Plague Bearers hold up quite successfully. And now the dwarves are stuck trying to grind through this. And this is already looking like a very, very good time to be a demon. You can see that Finger of Dwarves has now fled, but obviously they're going to rally at some point. And at this point, I'm not certain if I have a photo of it. No, I do not. But the Fleshhounds have arrived. and the flesh hounds are now threatening to hit that unit's unit that's been hit with the chariot in the rear, and that obviously is not a pretty sight for them at all. Okay, and that's the end of Demon turn. So Dwarf turn 4, and now this is looking a little bit more bleak. He rallies with the finger, and yeah, he's just grinding. He's knocking a couple of wounds off of the skull cannon in combat, but aside from that he's really not accomplishing much. The magical buffs are good. He does manage to get a gyrocopter charge onto Kairos, but again the light buffs are keeping him alive. And yeah, Kairos, he loses combat by 1, but he doesn't go anywhere. And yeah, this long grind, the Plague Bearers are just holding up. You can see the Demonettes have reformed from previously just to try help Kairos out. And yeah, it's not looking very pretty. In the combat with the BSB, the Beasts of Nurgle reformed because only one of them was in combat, so they managed to open up space for these Blood Crushers to come in and finally finish off that BSB. So that's looking like it's going to be mopped up quite nicely. And we see at the end of combat here, the Plague Bearers are taking damage, but they're taking very little damage, and it's quite amazing. The Ironbreakers, I should point out, are also leaking even less than the Plague Bearers, but you expect more of that from Ironbreakers. And the Plague Bearers just aren't giving away any sort of damage, while at the same time the most damage I'm leaking here is to that sodding chariot. But it's yeah, well, there's only so much you can ask for it. It's so dirt cheap, you really can't get upset about it. And then you can also see over there where the flesh hounds are ready to pounce. And so then we follow that up. The flesh hounds jump in. It's really easy. The Plague Bearers jump in behind the what's it called? The Plague Bearers jump on in behind the Ironbreakers. And as you can see here, it's fairly simple. The flesh hounds break and run down those dwarves, and there are 3 sodding Plague Bearers left alive. This turn actually my magics completely failed. Even with the reroll, Kairos failed to cast his first spell, and it all went, so he had no magic this turn. But by this stage I actually didn't need it. It didn't really matter. And we see that Chariot actually managed to charge down and get out of the way, which was again an incredible feat. And Kairos is just sitting there tying things up, and from here on up it's a little bit of a mop up. He tries to kind of support. He knows he can't charge the that finger of dwarves into the flesh hounds. They were actually facing the wrong way, and from here on Kairos actually gets a little bit greedy. I try to bulk up the small Plague Bearer block with regrowth. Well, sorry, not the small one, the grown one, just to see if I can crack that unit with combat res by breaking steadfast. So he tries regrowth there, but there's a bit too much damage that they can dish out. I try for the impact hits, but it's only strength 4, and it doesn't quite do enough. And that shows us the end of it, and the Ironbreakers don't even manage to kill those last 3 Plague Bearers. Those Plague Bearers have been sitting there the entire game, and yeah, that turns into a pretty solid victory for the Demons. So a very interesting game. I learned quite a bit about the Dwarves. I learned even more about Kairos. Things like if you're planning on throwing 4 or more dice at a spell, you don't care what happens on the Reign of Chaos table, you don't use your reroll until then. It's a hard lesson. I've picked it up. I think we did shortchange him. I have a sneaky suspicion, and I'm sure my opponent can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Hammerers forgot to use their second attack, which could have made quite a difference in that grind. But I was quite happy in the way they were isolated nonetheless. Dwarf warriors are frightening, especially when they charge and they're strength 5 on the charge. They're really, really scary. So with some slightly better rolls, they can absolutely decimate whatever they hit. So I actually like the combat dwarves. I do feel I got a bit lucky that my opponent was more interested in using the steam gun than in sacrificing them. He was a bit used to the old dwarves when he fled with the gyrocopter and he thought they had the fast cavalry rules still, and they've apparently lost that. But yeah, he really did need to use the gyrocopters to limit my movements, because like I said in the beginning, my plan was to isolate units, grind them down, while the dangerous stuff is kept off me. It's a pretty standard battle plan of mine, and I got to play it because the gyrocopters were not in my way, and that was big. As soon as someone flees, I get to choose where I'm going. The dwarves themselves, the war machines, are frightening. The grudge thrower, I never mentioned it. It did manage to land a rock on Kyros's head, but with a 4+ ward save and a reroll, I was okay with that. Well, I was okay when he made it. I bitched to high heaven as soon as he fails it, but yes, he was okay with that. Actually, quite an interesting Kyros list. I'm enjoying this Fate Weaver build quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to seeing more dwarves. I think they can do a lot. I do think that the Dwarf Lord should be running around with the Rune of Might, since whatever needs to be done at Strength 4 the Ironbreakers can do anyway. And it's only against Toughness 5 or higher that you really care about getting the big strength anyway. So I think he has a lot of play. Yeah, I still think 2 Runesmiths is a bit of wasted points. I'm not convinced on it, but it is relatively cheap, so I'm not going to call any dwarf player an idiot for taking them, but I will be more impressed when I see one and the points spent on more warm bodies. And that's all. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, feel free to comment. Tell me if I'm awesome. I know I am. Tell me if I'm an idiot. Please back it up. Cool. Okay. Cheers all. Thanks for watching.